This is David Shepard of the Good Shepherd YouTube channel. We're joined by a very talented writer, somebody who is a very professional person in the media in terms of how he covers stories on Awful Announcing. He's not just looking for clicks, although he does get a lot of clicks. He's looking for qualitative and substantive journalism, and that is none other than Sam Neumann. Sam, welcome back, man. How you doing, brother?
I'm doing well. I appreciate the kind words. Thanks for having me again.
Yes, absolutely, man. So listen, let's get started with that team on your hat. 7-10. This is not the season that Steve Cohen and Mets fans anticipated, giving up
Yeah.
arguably the most popular Met in quite some time. I know it's a sore subject, Sam. We won't talk about the Orioles and Pete Alonso. Where are you with the Mets right now?
I'm at the point where I'm getting annoyed, I'm frustrated, but I'm also I don't know, I feel like I was one of the people in the offseason from and I'm not going to speak for all Mets fans, but I felt like I was one of the only people that could see the forest for the trees and kind of see the moves that were being made. And I agreed with most of them. I mean, and I still agree with the process and I still agree with what they're doing. And I still think that this team is better than the team that we saw last year. But what are the optics? What do the optics say right now? The optics say that nothing has changed, right, in terms of performance. The optics say that they're 7-10. The optics say that they've lost six straight. The optics say that the manager is on the hot seat. I mean, they haven't picked up his option for next year. They fired his entire coaching staff. Steve Cohen is not one to fire managers, but if they come back from Wrigley Field going 1-5 or 0-6 on this road trip, like I don't know how you can sell it to your fan base to being what? I mean, that would put them at close to five, if not six, seven, 8 games under 500, um, looking in May in the face. So, this is a team that also has like three potential manager options in the waiting, whether you want to go with the bench coach and Kai Correa, Andy Green, who runs their player development side, who used to be the manager of the Padres. And then I think he was the Padres, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe I'm thinking of the wrong team. And then Carlos Beltran, of course. So I'm trying to stay level-headed after the games. During the games, I'm frustrated. Last night I was, watching the game in bed and just like, why am I doing this to myself? I always say that like, like why put yourself through this? And then I'm the one putting myself through it. So, and I'll continue. I'll tune in tonight. I'll tune in the night after that, and I'll tune in on Friday, Saturday, Sunday if I have time. I usually try and carve out time to watch them. Maybe not go out of my way to particularly like, hey, let's put off going to this store today or doing this chore and we'll watch. Yeah, I mean, but yeah, 7-10, they are what the record says. They have to play a lot better. I mean, it's just that simple.
Sam, again, like you do a good job covering announcers, sports media stories. One of the big stories that was clearly covered and written about a few weeks ago was the announcement that this is the final season of the great Howie Rose. This is not the partying gift that Howie Rose deserves in what is going to be his final full season for the Mets. As someone that has been such a supporter and a historian of this franchise, what has Howie Rose meant to you personally?
I would say Howie Rose has meant a lot to me personally. I would say that, I growing up as I did, we were given MLB TV, right? So that was from the get-go, like once we started that I was going to be a Mets fan, I was going to watch a game. So my dad and living in Charlotte, North Carolina after moving from New Jersey, we MLB TV was our thing. So I grew up with Gary, Keith, and Ron, but there were times where we had blackouts and you don't really want to listen to those announcers. And that would include, the Braves are blacked out in Charlotte. The Reds are blacked out in Charlotte. The Orioles, the Nationals. So, you know, I would tune the Howie if I could. I remember being late nights growing up when I know like I wasn't supposed to be watching anymore, and I'd follow like on game day and listening to Howie. Or even when we were up north visiting family and not having a chance to watch the game, just being able to turn like the dial. Like I remember my family and I going to a wedding in Connecticut and driving back and listening to Howie Rose call Steven Matz's debut, which is one of the greatest debuts of all time, where he like threw 7 innings of great baseball and had like four RBIs. So that I quantify that memory with Howie's specifically. So Howie's meant a lot to me personally. I would say that I listen to Gary Cohn more often than not, just because I like to watch the games if I'm able to. But having not to say that Howie's secondary and whatever, but as that being like your alternate option or your secondary option if you're watching the games on TV, I mean that's kind of hard to compete with. It just is. And I, appreciative for Apple TV when those games are on Friday Night Baseball and you have the opportunity to choose local radio. So hearing him call that game and watch it is really unique. Not something you get to do often because I mean to be you're not able to sync it up, right? Like if you're watching like back in the day, if I was watching Bob Carpenter and FP Santangelo call a game on mute and listening to Howie, like it was behind. No disrespect to them, but
Sure.
um, so Howie, I would say has a lot of meaning to me as Met fans and a lot of people that I know dear, and I would like to see him get out, sent out with the World Series, but not
Sam.
looking like that right now.
Listen, Sam, Michael Jordan has done this. Tom Brady has done this. They've reneged on a retirement decision. So I'm hoping that maybe the mediocre season for the Mets is a blessing in disguise. And now he's like, look, I can't go out like this. Again, we are joined by Sam Neumann of Awful Announcing. You know, it's interesting. We take on the identity of our sports teams, and we could spend hours talking about why watching another group of individuals, which really has nothing to do with our success and our lives, matter so much when it comes to our rooting interests. Sam, you're young, you're talented. I don't see any grays as a Jets fan yet. So my question is, they haven't won in your lifetime. They haven't won in my lifetime. It's actually been close to 60 years now, which is crazy to say. They haven't even
Yeah.
been back to a Super Bowl in nearly 60 years. How do you stay loyal to this team?
I mean, it's just I was born into this. I can't say that my loyalty, is extended forever. I mean, I've gotten to the point where I've gotten, apathetic. That doesn't mean I'll ever not be a Jets fan. I will always be loyal to this team and they will always be my number one NFL team. But I've gotten to a point where it's apathy. I mean, when it's the same thing every time and you're not necessarily expecting different results, it's like you're watching the same movie. You know how it ends. So, um, that's like after game one this past season where they look like good against the Steelers. My dad, who, turned me into a Jets fan, it was a Jets season ticket holder at some point in his life, was encouraged. And I looked at him or I said to him on the phone, I was like, I can't do the moral victories, not with this team. Like we can't say almost did it because then the next week Justin Fields threw for like 18 yards, I think. So that's kind of my philosophy is I just can't with the amount of times that this team is rebuilt in my lifetime already, I can't do the moral victories. I will be there as a fan. I have all the gear, being now that I live in Greenville, South Carolina now, so that they're not on local TV, I won't necessarily go out of my way to watch them. If the game pops on, great. If it's a good game, maybe I'll find a stream to watch it. But there was a point I mean, not too far long ago, my father and I had discussed like, hey, do we want to sign up for Sunday Ticket? When Aaron Rodgers and we were like, yeah, we're gonna wait a little bit,
Wait, I'm
week
sorry to
one.
interrupt you, Sam. Aaron Rodgers played for the Jets. He was the quarterback. I I,
Shocking, I know.
I didn't know because he had what, 6 wins in 2 years? Sorry.
The 23 season, we like, I think somehow the grace of God, like we
Yeah.
put off, like kept putting it down the road. We'll sign up for Sunday Ticket, and I think a lot of their first couple of games were on national TV. I think their second game they were like a 405 game against the Cowboys, which was like America's game that week. So we were like, all right, we'll kick that can down the road, and then that can got kicked maybe I don't know, like not even four snaps down the road, and we're like, yeah, we're not signing up for Sunday Ticket this year. So that's I don't know if that's emblematic of where my fandom is, but I feel like people will say stuff to me during the game, and I'm like, I'm not watching. Or like my dad will get angry, and I'll be like, did you expect anything different? Like, what are we doing here? So it's tough because I do love the Jets, but I've become more apathetic, and loyalty to me is it means a lot as being a Mets and Jets fan, and I will continue to be a Mets and Jets fan. But it's hard for me to give as much as I want to give when I don't really feel like the owner cares. And it's tough because I give everything I have to the Mets. The Mets are my favorite team, and um, I try and watch as much games as possible and go to as many games as I'm able to. And to me, like the owner cares. The owner puts forth like the effort that like we're going to spend as much money as possible. And maybe not so much in the past with his meddling, but he's kind of hands off and let my, president of baseball operations, for better or worse, like build this team in his image. It's not really a case for Woody Johnson and the Jets, and I don't know. I don't see them winning a Super Bowl as long as he's the owner of the team. I won't say it's impossible that they'll win anything in my lifetime because I mean, I've seen this team win playoff games. I've seen this team go to the championship. Granted, I was in championship game. Granted, I was in sixth grade, and now, I'll be in 27 in a few months. But yeah, I guess to answer the full of your question, I'm loyal, but maybe to a fault at this point.
Again, we are joined by Sam Neumann of Awful Announcing, has done a wonderful job for that very reputable and very important platform in sports media. That's for damn sure. Does a great job. His writing is insightful, it's opinionated, it's fair-minded, and obviously you're getting a good sense of that in this interview. Sam, when it comes to the Jets, and you're a student of sports, um, I look at the Saints. The Saints were no disrespect to, Arch Manning, no disrespect to Ricky Williams, Mike Ditka, Joe Horn. They turned a corner when Drew Brees got there. I'm a big NBA guy. The Detroit Pistons won 14 games 2 seasons ago. They win 62 years later. They're the number one seed in the Eastern Conference. Shea Gilgeous-Alexander, when he was with the Oklahoma City Thunder at the beginning of his stint there, they won 24 games and 25 games in his first 2 years there. This is Shea freaking Gilgeous-Alexander. You look at baseball. Texas Rangers had never won a World Series. Bruce Bochy, first year in Texas, they win. So I do believe with any organization, you just need that one guy to change everything. I'm a Yankees guy. And as much success as the Yankees had in the 80s in terms of, being above 500, they never won after 81 getting to a World Series.
Yeah.
They never won a playoff series for another 13, 14 years. And some shortstop from Kalamazoo, Michigan comes along, and you know the rest. Who's that guy for Sam Neumann out there? If it's a player, if it's a coach, I don't think it's going to be Geno Smith for you. That's going to be that individual that once and for all changes this Jets trajectory and culture for the better. Who's that one guy?
I don't know if that guy's on that team right now. Um, I don't know. It's hard to say because a couple years ago you'd asked me that I would have said Garrett Wilson. And I'm a big Garrett guy. I was on the record that if they like traded him, I was pretty close to being done.
Sure.
So, but again, like you got to have somebody throw him the ball, right? Like he can run open down the field. He can, be that leader in the locker room and be pissed off about wins and losses and not wins, but be pissed off about losses and you know, I don't know if that person is there right now for them because I'm not quite confident that this regime is going to take them to where they need to get. And I'm not quite confident that this roster is where it needs to be. So it's a great question, David. I wish I could give you like a person. Maybe that person is currently like sitting in a college classroom or a high school classroom right now. I don't know. Hopefully that person isn't getting off the bus from elementary school right now and
Right,
is not
right.
somebody who, 2045 or whatever is when they have that person. So I don't know. I like the culture that they're building. I think last year you kind of saw like a lot of the guys who were still there under Robert Sala who that anytime things would go wrong, it was kind of like, oh boy, here we go again. So um yeah, it's tough to say. I want to be able to pick a guy, but it's just I don't know if they're on the roster yet. I guess maybe this season will tell.
Again, we're joined by Sam Neumann of Awful Announcing. It's a pretty honest answer right there, and let's hope it is not getting off an elementary school bus, but more a college bus getting shuttled to another location on campus. Sam, we got the NBA playoffs coming up, and you do a great job covering that sport as well. What's the most interesting storyline for you going into the 2026 postseason?
I'm kind of and not to make this New York centric because I'm not a Knicks fan, I'm kind of curious about the Knicks. Like I feel like we came into the season where like yeah, like this is it. This is their best chance to win a championship, and that we just haven't seen this team like play to that level of basketball. And I think and whether you agree with what he said about this or not, like Stephen A. Smith made the claim today that Mike Brown might be the hot seat. So this is a coach coaching for his job potentially. This is a team maybe playing for their last kind of go round where this if this core can't make a run, you're probably not running it back with the same team again next year. So I'm very curious to see how they play in the playoffs because it's a team that could get eliminated in the first round, or they could make a run to the conference finals, NBA finals, and neither would surprise me. So they're my storyline worth watching, and I'm not just trying to say that as a New York sports fan. I think they play a solid brand of basketball, and it'll just be intriguing to see if like they hit their ceiling with Tibbs and can't really reach much more with Mike Brown. And then I guess the other storyline, I'm just curious to see if the Thunder are able to repeat. I think they have every right to, and they have every chance to. But as we know, that doing that, regardless of how many teams have done in the past in this sport, it's one of the hardest things to do in any sport. I mean, it just doesn't happen like that. I mean, it's happened with teams that's why we call them dynasties, right? The teams that are able to do that. So, um, I don't want to like take the easy answer to like say Thunder or Knicks, but I feel like those are the two most interesting storylines for me, just to if following basketball, if we're going from a more like outsider's perspective here.
It's interesting, Sam, because I have this conversation all the time on SiriusXM NBA radio, and also when I'm on ESPN with Freddie and Harry, and Freddie Coleman is a big Knicks guy, and he's big on Mike Brown. And what I'll tell them is, look, yeah, the Knicks have two more wins this year, but this was a very down year for Boston. This was an opportunity for the Knicks to pounce because you don't have Jason Tatum for three-fourths of the season, and the Celtics end up with the better record.
Yeah.
So I don't want us to be confused by the two more wins that the Knicks have under Mike Brown over Tom Thibodeau last year, because this was an easier season to get that number two seed and to have 50 plus wins with the Celtics having a quote unquote down year, and the Knicks weren't able to
Yeah.
capitalize. And then to your point with the Oklahoma City Thunder, there has not been a repeat champion going past the second round of the playoffs since the Golden State Warriors, to your point, which was the last dynasty that we've seen, and that was with five Hall of Famers. I do think Iggy eventually gets in. I think obviously Dre,
Yeah.
Clay, Steph, KD, they're all first ballot Hall of Famers. You can make an argument that they got six Hall of Famers if you include Steve Kerr. Again, we're joined by Sam Neumann of Awful Announcing. Sam, I got a couple of more for you. Um, you do a great job covering the media. And I don't think what you write is about the awfulness when it comes to announcing. I think a lot of what you do, which is why I respect your work so much, is you highlight and you celebrate those in sports that do a great job, that are passionate about what they do, that do make great points, that do have killer segments, that are absolutely must listen, appointment listening, appointment television. I'm just curious for you, as someone that is about to turn 27. You've been in this business now for a few years. How would you assess the landscape of sports media from when you started to now?
That's a great question. That's a good question. Yeah, I mean it's a tough way to look at it for me just because I'm not doing what I thought I was going to do when I entered the field. Like be point blank, I never thought I'd be doing what I'm doing and working for Awful Announcing. When I came into the field, like I was pretty hell bent on like I want to be a beat reporter, and I ultimately made a decision that making $30,000+ to cover Clemson like 24/7 wasn't the life I wanted to live, and I chose one that I feel like is better for me. So, but I guess in terms of the landscape, I think it's just been kind of maybe a sad erosion of institutions. There's been some innovations, and we've seen like a lot more pivot to video, right? And see kind of content creators be embedded, and we've seen kind of the athlete-led era, and whether you like athlete-hosted podcasters or athlete forums, like kind of I'm the eye of the beholder. But I think we've seen a shift from what we knew as some institutions to kind of a new age media, whether we like it or not. I mean, if we want to just go back this year, the Washington Post no longer has a viable sports section. That's an institution that's gone. There's layoffs that seem that happen almost. I don't want to say every day, but I feel like at least maybe once, twice, three times a month you're seeing people that have said that they've been let go. And it's tough because it's an industry that I idolized growing up, and it's an industry that I wanted to be a part of. And I think we see how much goes into it, and I think we see how much coverage is involved, and think we see how much people care about sports. And I think there's just been like a constant but slow burn and churn of the institutions, and kind of the sports media that we grew up on. And again, I'm not here to say whether that's for better or for the worse. I think people losing their jobs is obviously for the worse. And I think, losing some of the things that have that people grew up on, whether we're just rooted in nostalgia or whatnot, is not great. I mean, looking around the horn, I mean, I think you could make the argument right now that the Around the Horn should still be on TV. ESPN hasn't exactly replaced it with anything. We have a 5 o'clock version of SportsCenter now instead of that. So I would say that the way that the landscape has shifted, in my opinion, is towards new age, where we're kind of leaving a certain type of journalism, a certain type of sports media person behind. And I think we could say that about all of media, but maybe it's more apparent in sports just because, you and I are in this ecosystem. So, yeah, I think that's how I'd clarify it. It's a great question. I wish I could give you like an answer where it's like, yeah, I can point to this, but I felt like it's kind of just slowly eroded in one direction and grown up in the other direction that maybe people don't necessarily want it to.
Oh, absolutely. And again, we are joined by Sam Neumann, and he does a great job with talking about sports media, not just in his writing, but on the Awful Announcing podcast. And I highly encourage people who aren't just in the industry, but beyond the industry to really understand where it is they're coming from with their perspective, how they go about deciding what they write about, what is going to really, move the needle, so to speak. And you do a great job with Brandon Clean whenever I check out the podcast or if it's Brandon contests. And there's many others as well. The last question I have for you, Sam, is, I've been in this industry for 17 years. It's a long time. And the direction that I've seen it go in, full transparency, is the negativity and the beef between major personalities. And it seems like that gets more coverage. And I'm not assigning blame to anybody here. You guys are simply covering what are the main talking points in sports. Other organizations, Bleacher Report, Yahoo Sports, you guys are simply covering what's going on. But I don't remember this being this many beefs in the 16 years previously to me being in sports than there has been in 2026. It's unbelievable. And I think the pushback that I hear from fellow hosts, from fellow sports personalities, it's like, damn, like we used to talk about sports. Now we're talking about people covering sports, and that seems to get more traction than anything else. And it seems like we're going in a direction of if you say something negative and you attack someone, you get a lot more traction than just actually covering and giving the sport the substance that you feel like it deserves. So that's a long way of saying I feel like as an industry, we've gone to the controversy, negative, salacious route, and that seems to be getting more coverage than anything else. Is what I'm saying fair, unfair? And then what would you say to those people that say, hey, listen, I do a great show, but it's not getting covered unless I attack someone or unless I, engage in a bitter feud? Because I think that's where a lot of people are disappointed by the specific industry and the direction it's going in that regard.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a fair characterization. I think to your point, before I get into that, I would say that like one of the words of advice that I got, like just growing up in this industry in college, is like, you're not the story. And I feel like we have gone so far away from that, where like people in the
Yes,
space have made themselves the story, for
absolutely.
better or worse. Granted, does it help us at awful announcing? It sure does. Um,
Yes.
but is that what people want to see though? I don't necessarily think that these people's audiences want them to have gripes with other people in sports media. I think, beefs are beefs. If it happens organically and like you can pinpoint to like why it's transpired and why like there's back and forths, and you're not just like doing whether you're not just doing it for show and making it WWE. I mean, I feel like you can make the argument that a lot of the beefs are just like WWE stuff right now. And I'm not like a wrestling fan, but like I think if you kind of looked at it from that spear, like yeah, some of these stuffs are definitely works, and some of these people, are saying not necessarily just for the beefs, but they're saying salacious things just to get clicks. And
Sure.
um, I think that's the kind of the nature, right? Because we're in an era of people who have grown up of learning how to go viral. So what can I say that'll make me go viral? What can I do that'll make me go viral? And I mean, I don't think that's necessarily like what audiences are looking for, but I think we've kind of gotten to a point where people are less are li listening less to what their audiences want out of them and listening to more out of what the algorithm wants. And we're kind of, that direction is what it is in terms of like what necessitates it. But yeah, I mean, I don't personally think it's good for the industry. Like, obviously, like I don't like go out and see like when I'm trying to write a story for Awful Announcing, like who's fighting with who. But like if it happens, it happens. Like, um, I would argue that two sports media personalities like attacking each other is right in our wheelhouse. I mean, it just is what it is. But like you also can go to a point, and I would say he's kind of different than from, a radio host in Houston and a radio host in, Cleveland, like trading barbs for God knows what reason. But like Stephen A. Smith has maybe like a feud with almost everybody, and it seems like, and then, but like he's been able to turn that into content. So I think we've kind of seen an era of people who are, content creators and whatnot, like see that they can turn this, virality into content, and they can turn anything into content necessarily. So, um, I mean, I think we can agree that it's not great. Like it's just like I don't want to see like people just like taking shots because they think that somebody's going to pick it up, or that it's going to get covered by Awful Announcing, or that it's going to get 4 million views on X. Like it's just, I think we have kind of, and not to say that this is necessarily related to any radio host or anybody in specific, but I think we've kind of gotten to a point where people they know like what sells, and they're willing to do what it takes to sell it. I mean, they say, hey, I argue this point, you argue that. I don't necessarily agree with it, but like it's like it's like they're in high school, like doing like mock trial, and they don't necessarily believe what they're arguing, but they know that people are gonna be listening. So, um, all of that to say, I think it's just an indictment on the industry right now, and whether you think that it's a good indictment or bad indictment, it's again on the eye of the beholder. And as I'll go back to it, we we cover sports media beefs. I mean, that's pretty much who we are. And people don't necessarily like love when we cover it, or others are kind of like, well, that's not really like a beef, but like you're going out on a limb when you do that stuff. So, not to say that like we look out to cover that stuff, and not to say that like, you know, when that stuff comes across we're like salivating at the mouth, I can't wait to post this, but like it's kind of just what the industry is now, right? Like I mean, there'll probably be something that we cover this week where insert radio host calls out ESPN, whatever. I mean, it's just the nature of the beast. It's just where we're at. And I don't know. I think maybe we have the algorithms to blame for that.
Where I will give you guys a lot of credit off announcing is that you're not fanning the flame. You're journalists doing your job. and you're putting your 2 cents on it and your perspective on it, and you're looking at it from a big picture. So you are acknowledging that those interactions take place. Obviously, the big story this week, and you've talked about it enough, and it's unfortunate, no matter how you slice it, Dianna Russini and Mike Vrabel. And I don't feel like at any point you guys have elevated the temperature. You're doing your job. You're covering it. This is without question the story, not just in sports these past 72 hours, but it's been the story in arguably American culture. And you're having a conversation, you're having a dialogue about it, and you're looking at it from all sides and all perspectives. And I don't know if every big time publication has done that. And it's why I'm a fan of what you guys do. It's why I have you on, Sam, because you offer a perspective that's not just you being the story, but you're looking at the story from different lenses and different nuances. And that's something that I think is so needed in our society today, beyond sports, by the way. Because Sam, as you know, there's a lot of coverage in media that's very one-sided and it doesn't look at the other. So I wanted to give you your kudos, and not just you,
Appreciate
Sam,
that.
what awful announcing does. Because I read it, man. I read your articles. It means a lot to our industry. I don't know how many hosts tell you that, but it does. It means a lot to what we do because you guys are an amazing mouthpiece to what it is that we're disseminating and broadcasting. So I hope you know that.
I really appreciate you saying that. Yeah, I mean, I don't think I go out there, me or my colleagues go out there looking to like do gotcha or kind of
Right.
like, or like I'm not signing on in the morning and wanting to take people to task. But if the opportunity opens itself, it's kind of like, we need to call balls and strikes. And to your point, like I said, like I really appreciate you saying that. That means a lot. We don't necessarily hear it from everyone. Um, and when we do hear it, it's mostly, in private, and that's fine. People are allowed to share their opinions and whatnot. And we don't really do this for validation. But it's nice to get validation when we do. So, yeah, I mean, I would like to think that we're one of the sports media sites out on record, and what we cover is a niche that other outlets have give attention to, but I don't think anybody covers it in the full scope that we do. So, but yeah, just your point about Dianna Russini, I think, and we didn't really, and not to make this about her, but I don't think from the people who don't see how the sausage made it awful announcing, there's not like for us, there wasn't like, hey, this is how we're going to cover it. It was just kind of came across our desks and was like, are we telling, like, we're telling what we know, we're telling what we're going to say, what other people said, we're going to offer our opinion on maybe, the industry as a whole, or maybe insiders, and we don't necessarily need to, pile on in the regard that this is people's personal lives. But I think we have done enough to give context on each of the issues, um, and be a part of the conversation without like giving as much as, or like give it like be a part of the conversation without telling you how to think, I think. And I appreciate that. And I think the fact that like it's kind of understood amongst us at AA that like, hey, like this is how we should cover it, and not necessarily, not to say that we haven't had conversations about how we should cover certain things, but I feel like just this past week we've just been all in lockstep on how this is covered. I mean, granted, some of the articles are a little different, and we'll give differing viewpoints. Like, just to go back to Diana thing, we have freelancer Alex Reimer who wrote a piece about what if this is, the norm for insiderdom, and then our managing editor Sean Keeley wrote an article for that was repurposed from our newsletter. It was about that how it became fan fiction. So kind of how everybody was just kind of like making the situation out to be not more than it was, but offer casting their own aspersions on it. So it's kind of two different viewpoints that are not in the same lane of thought, but also like we don't necessarily, I don't think any of us expect to that we're all going to have the same opinion on everything, and that's fine. It's yeah. So to put a bow on that, I think that we try, like, it's a cliche, but we try to call balls and strikes when we can. And we try to be fair. Like I don't go into my day looking to hear from a PR person. It's just not. I don't. I deal with plenty of pleasant PR people, and there's many of them who I text and talk to frequently. I wouldn't say we're not doing our job if we're not pissing people off, because when you do your job the way that we do it, we tend to make people angry. But I don't necessarily go into a shift saying, "Hey, like my goal is to hear from ESPN PR today." Um,
Right, right. I mean, like the thing, like I mean, I'm not an idiot. I'm not. I mean, I have a platform, I have a following, but I'm not Stephen A. I'm not Colin Cowherd, right? I'm not Dan Patrick. If those guys breathe wrong, it's going to be an article. Like that's just
yeah,
you guys know who the main players are. But I also think what I want to highlight with you guys is you're also fair. You're not Angel Hernandez. You guys, when someone does something incredible, you write about it. When Mike Breen makes a great point advocating for fans, you write about it. You'll also write about, hey, it was the unexpected, back and forth between Mike Breen and Stephen A. Smith that no one anticipated. So you guys, you guys do a really good job of, I think, balancing it. And if you are in the public eye, and I'm not an A-list celebrity, but I'm in the public eye, you're just going to get written about. It happens. It comes with the territory. But you guys have always been very fair in your coverage of me, and you guys, I think, are fair in your coverage of everybody. I think Bob Costas would even admit that. He admitted that to Brandon Contas, I think, to a large degree when he did that podcast with him. So, it's this is what you sign up for. And it's not all going to be favorable. And if the coverage is all favorable, then it doesn't merit any credence and credibility because
yeah,
it's all just simply a puff piece.
yeah. We're not a PR arm.
Right, right, right. No, exactly, man. Well, listen, Sam, great having you on the Good Shepherd YouTube channel. I think a lot of people read awful announcing, and I'm glad that they get to meet a face and a voice behind it. So we'll definitely have you on again down the road, and appreciate your coverage, man, and look forward to what you write about when it comes to the NBA playoffs as well, man. Appreciate your time, brother.
Appreciate you having me on. Thanks so much. This was great, and hopefully, the next time we talk, the Mets are not buried underwater somewhere.